we are going to talk about a very special feature in Salesforce, and it's not only specific to Salesforce. It's applicable to REST API in general, and it's called Etags. And I want to talk about this feature because we don't normally use this feature in Salesforce projects, in the integration projects. This is also documented quite well in Salesforce, but somehow this always go unnoticed in our integration-based projects. And that's why I want to cover this topic so we can leverage these available features in Salesforce as well. Yes, so let's talk about ETag. So the MDN documentation states that ETag is a type of response header. It's a type of identifier for a very specific version of a resource. Now, this is a bit tricky to understand, but you can imagine that every resource, every record, every data, anything on Salesforce can also have a, something like a fingerprint, which is called ETag. And then this ETag value can be somehow stored by the client, and then the client can tell the server that please only return me this data if this has not changed at your site. So ETag is basically a fingerprint or a hash of the complete resource on the server. So every time a resource, a record, a data changes on the server, a new ETag or a new hash is generated. Right? And we will see how this is working like in action. But yeah, it could be a bit tricky to understand right now, but just hold on to the fact that for every resource or every data, there is an ETag which gets generated on the server. And then this ETag can be distributed to the clients, and the client can store this ETag and then use those ETag values in subsequent API call. So that's the formal definition as of now. We will see how that works in general in a demo. And then the second use case is that it can be used to prevent simultaneous updates. So if multiple clients are trying to update the same record at the same time, generally what happens that there is a lost update case that if only the last update persists and the previous updates are gone. So to remediate those um, um, issues when you have like multiple clients trying to update the same record, this ETag can be used. So yeah, so we have discussed the use cases already. So caching on the client side and to manage concurrency. Now we have some specific HTTP headers that supports ETag. Four of them are being discussed here. So we have if match, we have if none match, we have if modified since and unmodified since. So we are going to use these four HTTP headers to discuss and to just check the demo. Please hold on if you don't understand still. We will look at this in a demo in a while. So the use case is this. The client makes a GET request and the server responds with a response, but in the response, it also sends an ETag value. The client is going to store the ETag value, so there has to be some code, there has to be some management on the client side as well to store those ETag values. And then the client is going to use the same ETag value in the subsequent calls. So in this case, what we are saying that if none match, the client is saying to the server that if there is no ETag that matches this ETag on your side, then you return me the response. Otherwise, you don't need to return me the response because I already have the data. And I will assume that that is the fresh and that is the most up-to-date version of the record. Let's go back to Salesforce and see how it works. Okay, so this is my workbench. I already have this URL and this is just an account record. This is my ID which already exists in Salesforce. So I'm going to execute this ID. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm going to execute this request. Yeah, I have the response now. Let's check the raw response. In the raw response, you can see that Salesforce returns this ETag value. So this is the ETag value. And as I said before, this ETag is a hash or a fingerprint of the complete data set. So even if you change a single record, let's say if you change the type, if you change the name or any field at all in Salesforce for this particular account record, the ETag will be changed. So you will have a new ETag in, let's say, let's try out. So remember the ETag is like BS6R. So I'll go to Salesforce and this is my same record, Smith Computing. So I'm going to like click on edit and change the industry to electronics and then click on save. And then if I come back to Workbench, you will see this BS6R ETag will be changed. So let's make another request. Yeah, and then let's go to raw response, and the ETag has changed. We have a new value. So now you understand how ETag works. Now, as a client, so let's assume that uh, this is an integration project. The client has been told to store the ETag value. So I'm going to copy this value. So assume the client has stored this ETag value somewhere in their on the client side. It could be browser, it could be any third-party system, and they have to have some kind of mechanism to store the ETag values. All right. So what it's gonna do is that as a client, I don't want to receive the same response from Salesforce if nothing has changed on the Salesforce side. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm going to pass a header, and this header is very simple header. We have to say like if none dash match colon and then this ETag value. So the client is saying that you only return me the response if this value doesn't match with your ETag value. Let's see what happens. Yeah, it works. Salesforce says that HTTP 1.1304 not modified. It means that yes, the data which you have is perfectly up to date, and we are not sending you the request because you don't need it, right? And you can see how much bandwidth you have saved here. And I don't have an exact figure as in how much kilobytes or bytes have you saved in such request, because I have not done that kind of research. But you can imagine that in a large scale implementation when you have like many API calls going back and forth from Salesforce, in those cases, even these small details can help a lot because you have to multiply this into like a huge number of API calls. So yeah, now if you go back to header, if you replace none by blank, so you are saying if match, then of course it should return the result because it is going to match. Nobody has changed it on the server side yet. So let's see what happens. Yeah, and we got the full response, and the ETag value is same, which is SZBM, and we have the same ETag value, right? So this is fine. So if match and if none match, this is how the client can store the ETag value and then cache the results on the client side and only request the server to send the result if something has changed on the server. So that's the caching part. We also have like two more headers, which is let's go back to the here. So we have if modified since and if unmodified since. So that's also possible. You just have to simply pass the value. So let's see. I'm going to write if modified since and then pass on this value, right? So I'm write if modified since, and then I'm going to, instead of this ETag value, I'm going to pass um, this. It says that it's yesterday's date, and then execute. Yeah, it returns because it has been modified since yesterday. That's right. Uh, but I think probably I missed something here. Yeah, if modified since. So we are getting the response because it was modified since yesterday. Made a change. Um, I just made a change because it says the last modified is 30th of June, and then we are passing 29th, right? So that's why we are getting the response. And if we say if unmodified since, then it should not return me anything at all because it has been modified. Yeah, let's see what happened here. If unmodified since Wednesday, 29th of June, if it has been unmodified since 29th of June, then it's going to return me. Yeah, sorry. There was a mistake on my side. I had to remove the inverted commas. So yeah, so it's not going to return me anything now because it has been modified. So that's why the precondition has failed. It says precondition failed. So I think this GET request is quite simple. And then the client can leverage the ETag value to store the value on the client side and only request when there is a need to get data from the server. And this is how it works. And this only works for S-object resource and only for account. So let's move on to the official Salesforce documentation, which is this one, right? So it says that, yeah, supported object is accounts only. So you can only use if match and if none match for account records only. So that's one of the limitation that you have to remember, that this only works for account object and only works for S object rows. So as long as the query is simple, um, you can leverage this ETag value. It's not, and I have checked that on a different object. I checked the same for context and opportunity. This ETag value was not returned by Salesforce, which proves the fact that it only works for account. Now, the second use case is also very interesting, which is about the concurrency, right? So in this use case, uh, let's assume that there are multiple clients. There are two clients, and both of them are trying to basically update the same record. So they always start by making a GET request. So let's say both of them made a GET request, and both of them received the same ETag value, right? Because they will receive the same ETag value because nothing has changed. Now both of them saved the ETag value on their local storage, both the browsers or both the client. And then let's say one client has type value as industrial and the other client has type value as mechanical. The first one updates it, the update will go through, and when the one will update that, the update will not go through because the one will have an ETag value which is outdated now, right? So let's see. The first one makes an update, and then the ETag on server changes because that has changed the record. And then when the second one tries to update the same record with the previous ETag value, it's going to stop you from doing that, saying the precondition has failed. And that's how we can manage the concurrency. If we don't use the ETag, then the latest update will persist in Salesforce. Let's see. So I'm going to make a patch request and I'm going to change the fax value to a random number, right? And then I'm going to, let's say, yeah, remove this. I'm going to execute. The update has been made. Let's verify. And yeah, let's verify with the raw response. We also have the ETag here, and we also have a fax, which is the new fax here, correct? And this is the ETag, okay? Now, let's go to patch again, and let's go to headers. And here we say if match and then this value. Now what we are saying that please only update this fax value if the ETag value matches, right? Because the client is saying that if something has not changed on your side and if we both have the same ETag value, then please go ahead and update this fax number to this given account record. Very simple. Now, but let's assume that some another process is also trying to update the same account. So I don't have a client, but I can simulate that. Let's go back to Salesforce and let's assume that another process is trying to update the same record. And let's say the employees was changed 500. Now you can imagine that once you change this record, the ETag must have changed on the back end. This means that now this ETag is out of date, and if this client updates this given record with this out of date ETag, let's see, it says match precondition failed, right? This is because I have an outdated ETag. This means that if two clients are trying to update the same record at the same time, Salesforce is going to stop one of them because the precondition will fail. And in this case, the client needs to get the request again, right? It has to get the request again. It has to get the new ETag value, which is this one, right? And then it has to basically make a patch request, and it can say that please update that value if match. If it is matching, then please update the value. Yeah, it says, yeah, it has been updated, right? And then if you go back and then execute, sorry, we have to remove this one because we are saying if match. Let's say if none match. Then we have the new fax value. Yeah, so these two are like a very common use case of using ETags. And well, it's a very short video, and in a very short time, I have tried to explain what ETag does. So to sum it up, ETag is for maximizing performance on the client side by caching, and it is also for concurrency management. And I'll repeat one more time. You can use ETag value, so the client can store the ETag value in a local storage on the client side, and then it can say that please only update a given Salesforce record if this ETag matches with you, right? So if none matches, so we are trying to say that if there is no match, then please go ahead and update. If there is a match, they don't update. And the same goes for the concurrency, that if there is a match, then you please update that. But if there is no match, then Salesforce is going to say that, okay, the precondition has failed. So please go back in the video and then please look at it again if you don't understand something, and please leave your comment on YouTube, this video, and then I can try to answer those comments as soon as possible. So thanks a lot for staying, and thanks a lot for listening to me.